the News Channel 5 network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. It's President's Day weekend, a time to honor those who've served as our nation's chief executive and assess the changes in that office since 1792. That's when George Washington became the first person to serve in that post under our Constitution. Dr. John Vial is the chair of the Political Science Department at Middle Tennessee State University. He's our guest. Dr. Vial, thanks as always for coming back on the show.
Glad to be here.
As the first president and the father of our country, George Washington in some ways created that post, including the tradition that he began, that's now the law, that presidents can only serve 2 four-year terms. But the federal government today and the modern office of the presidency is very different from anything he ever presided over.
It is. A lot of it has to do with changes in technology, particularly media. Part of it, of course, you know, one of the most fascinating things about the current president is he's the first president to come into office without either prior political office or military service. And by military service being a general or, you know, something like that.
Until this president.
Until this president. But Trump is the first.
You know, if George Washington was back here today and the other founding fathers were here and they saw the office of the presidency and they saw the federal government, first of all, there's lots of things they wouldn't understand in terms of technology and things that have changed, but would they sort of approve of what was going on? If they could understand it, would they say, okay, this is what kind of where we thought it would ultimately go, although we had no idea it would grow like this? Or would they have some concerns?
I think you know, one of my specialties is sort of the founders, particularly up through about Madison or Monroe, and I think they would be shocked by the degree to which the presidency has become a populist institution. Now, to some degree, that began, you know, Jefferson was something of a populist. Jackson certainly was. So it's not completely new, but I think they would regard a good bit of modern politics as probably pandering rather than, you know, true statesmanship.
And we had presidents who never campaigned for office except off their front porch. And some of them didn't do that. They just wrote letters about it.
That's right. And I mean, actually, until about 1896, sort of William Jennings Bryan, it was most presidents rarely spoke in public or campaigned in public. And, you know, one of the things that Andrew Johnson faced was, you know, his speeches were probably not as inflammatory as some of our modern debates, but it was considered highly unseemly for a president.
Now, President's Day has been a federal holiday since back in 1885, but it was originally was only for George Washington. It was actually celebrated every year on February 22nd.
Right.
Now it's the third Monday of February, but it's become a 3-day holiday for lots of folks, banks and government employees. But in a lot of cases, it's not much more than an excuse for special retail offers when you turn on TV.
I noticed the two advertisements are the kid showing her mother an advertisement and, you know, read me a bedtime story, and it's about how George Washington was our first president and now we have firm mattresses. So yes, and you know, we've done something of the same thing with the 4th of July and, you know, Columbus Day for a while and other holidays. So it's.
We mentioned President Trump. All presidents changed the office while they were there. In the year plus that he's been in office, how has Donald Trump changed the presidency?
You know, one of the biggest changes may be not so much in the presidency as in the campaigning. It's hard to think of some parallels maybe with Barry Goldwater, or, you know, some maybe Huey Long, you could maybe Joe McCarthy, but certainly the campaigning was very different. In terms of the presidency, it seems a lot more sort of a shoot from the hip kind of presidency than we've had in the past. And it's not at all clear to me that the internal White House staff situation has been worked out to any satisfaction.
President Trump certainly has popularized for a president to be on Twitter, or all presidents in the future are going to have to be on Twitter the way presidents had to have live TV news conferences, the way John Kennedy started, or fireside chats like FDR.
Remember, Obama did something similar with emailing or whatever the technology was when he ran. Sometimes what you'll have after a presidency is a counter-presidency, and to some degree I think that's a little bit of what you're getting with Trump and Obama. Obama came across I don't know what his private life is necessarily, but he always came across as very sort of cool, very calm, almost an anti-Trump, or Trump is sort of an anti-Obama. And yes, they use some of they both like executive orders, and that aspect of the presidency has grown. But wouldn't surprise me to see somebody coming back with a very different personality to follow Trump.
Let me ask the opposite question of what I ask about how Trump has changed the presidency. So far, how is the presidency changing Trump, or is it?
I have said this before, but of all the promises that Trump has made, in my judgment, the one that he has least kept is that he's going to be the most presidential of any person we've ever had. It doesn't seem to have changed him that much. What we saw is pretty much looks like what we got.
In terms of communication, most presidents have wanted to have a controlled message as best they can, but stay on message and have a message for a day or a week or something like that. This administration seems to have so many messages every day that they often get in the way of each other. So how does that help him with his communications?
Well, I'm not sure that it does. There are certainly times where it seems, if you wanted to interpret some of it rationally, you could say it was diversionary. Better to be talking about something inconsequential but highly emotional over here than a piece of legislation that you're not being very successful with in front of Congress. But I think that's probably being over generous. I think a lot of it just comes from a personality that really can't, when he wants to say something, he's going to say it, whether it necessarily furthers the cause or not.
This White House has a high level of turnover. Lots of White Houses in their first years have that, but it seems to be more extraordinary and at a higher level for this administration. How much is it hurting President Trump?
Well, it can't be helping. I was just reading a new biography of Gerald Ford. And when he came into office under somewhat unusual circumstances, and they were explaining, one pattern of leadership was this sort of spoke thing, where there wouldn't be anybody really in control. You just sort of they tried it for a while, and it didn't work very well. And I think one of the disappointments in the last couple of weeks is a lot of people had sort of hoped that maybe John Kelly was a person who could, organize it and sort of make sure we had, as you say, more of a central vision, and he seems really to have messed up, in my judgment, in terms of, particularly the vetting and whatever that's necessary.
Dr. John Weil, the chairman of the Department of Political Science at MTSU, is our guest today. It's President's Day weekend. We're talking about this president and the history of the presidency. Back to continue our conversation after this break.